Welcome to the Bold Money Revolution podcast. This is your source for straight talking, no fluff, business and high performance conversations that add real depth and value to the way bold leaders live, work, and thrive. I'm your host, Tara Newman. I'm here to show you how to optimize your performance as a leader so that you can grow a business that is profit-rich, efficient, and allows you to generate real, tangible wealth for yourself and others. We are here to help you lead with your values, to perform without overwhelm and burnout, and to do your most important work in the world. Hey, Tara here. I don't know if you've heard the exciting news, but I have a simple and easy way for you to calculate a clear revenue goal so you're able to pay yourself and have the additional money you want for those lifestyle upgrades. I hear from women all the time that navigating their numbers and spreadsheets just isn't their strength and can even be incredibly intimidating at times. So if this sounds like you, don't worry, I got you. This revenue goal calculator is programmed based on my work as a profit first certified consultant, which means you will know exactly how much money you can afford to pay yourself, how much money you will need to save for taxes, and how much money you can put toward the running of your business. All you need to do is key in a few numbers and dare to dream. So to grab your revenue goal calculator right now, run, don't walk, and start paying yourself more, go to theboldleadershiprevolution.com/revenue. Hey, bold leaders. Welcome to another episode of the Bold Money Revolution podcast. I'm Tara Newman. I am your hostess with the mostest, and I gotta tell you, I'm really excited. We have been watching the downloads for the podcast really start to increase this year. And that's after 5 years of podcasting, folks. So full transparency, when you start a podcast, it is a very, very long game that requires you to have the resiliency and a plan in place for growth. One just doesn't flick open a microphone and have at it, I guess, is what I am going to say. So thank you all for being here. Thank you all for tuning in each week. Thank you for sharing with friends and family and people in your community. Thank you to those who leave us reviews. As a matter of fact, we received a pretty awesome review the last time I checked, and I'm going to read it. So if you want to leave us reviews, I will start sharing them at the top of the episodes. So this review came in from when I'm recording this. I'm recording this in the beginning of May, and this review came in at the end of April. And the review says, "Skip B School." And this is from a fan from Baltimore. "Tara really knows her stuff when it comes to building a sustainable and sustaining business, but she also knows how to teach and train." I'm assuming this is somebody who might be in my community, or maybe they're just getting a lot of value out of this podcast. She goes on to say, or he goes on to say, or they go on to say, "If you are going to follow one person in this space, it should be Tara. Other gurus and coaches and mentors are charging 5 and 6 figures for what she offers in this free podcast. Follow her advice and your business will be stronger." Thank you so much, fan from Baltimore. And like I said, I would totally appreciate it if you took a couple of minutes, doesn't take very long, and leave me a review. I'm excited to read them on the show as they come in. And thank you for sharing, and thank you for being here. Today's episode is money related, but it might be a little different than what I normally talk about. I don't know. I can't tell anymore. But what I want to do is I want to walk you through a big financial decision that I made. And I talked about it actually on the podcast not too long ago. I was saying that I was considering buying a car. I've typically been somebody who has leased a car, but I was considering buying a car, and I have finally made that decision, and I have completed the purchase just this past weekend. And I thought it might be good to share. Now, what I don't want you to be taking away from this is that Tara bought a car or thinks you should buy a car versus lease a car. I actually don't have any opinion. And it really, really depends on your personal situation. Leasing cars are a great way to drive a vehicle at a price point that you can afford by just shopping around for lease payments, right? And we know that buying a car, you wouldn't want to buy a new car because cars really lose their value the second they roll off the lot. So that's not always a great decision around buying a car. So what I'm going to share is just my process for purchasing a big investment, for making a big purchase. And I think that is probably where I want you to kind of take some value away from this episode. So I'm just going to give you a little backstory and context around me and vehicles. So in 2009, one of my lease vehicles, I was leasing at the time a Toyota Highlander, and the lease was up. Now, this was in the middle of the Great Recession. It was in the middle of our first business, that my husband was running the first business. I was still working for an employer because we needed health benefits and we needed steady income coming in. We had 2 young children. My son was 3, my daughter was 1 at this time. And we went to go and lease another Toyota Highlander, and we were very, very surprised to find out that we could not afford it. So it was like a year that they had improved the design or what have you on the Highlanders, which is had always felt like a very pretty basic vehicle. But they had made some changes and the lease payments had gone up significantly and we couldn't afford it. And for me, it was a huge, huge moment for me emotionally to realize that this life that we once had that was affordable was no longer affordable. Now, our financial situation this was 4 years in, right? I already knew this. This wasn't shocking to me per se. We had been struggling for a very, very long time starting this first business. And it was sucking all of our capital and all of our energy and all of our time to keep it going. So this wasn't necessarily new, but it just felt like a different level of a gut punch that we couldn't afford this car. I got really concerned for what could we afford, because I did need a vehicle to get back and forth to work, to something that I could put the kids into and get them to daycare, because that was a whole part of my routine at the time, was rushing through my morning to get the kids ready, to get them into daycare so I could get to work on time, where my boss would stand in front of my office, no joke, with her clipboard and a watch, making sure I was there at exactly 8:00 in the morning. It's any wonder why women leave their places of employment. So this was a big deal. And it did feel like a part of my freedom could be taken away. And so we did some research, after we freaked out, we did some research, and we did some research on what's a really safe car, what's a really reliable car, engine-wise. And my husband has incredibly good handyman skills. He's used to working on cars. He's very mechanical. So I'm very fortunate to have somebody who speaks that kind of language, because I don't. And so that is definitely a strength where I do not have a strength. And what we did was we found an auction site that auctioned off used cars, and we put a bid in on a Volvo station wagon. And luck was on our side in the sense that nobody else bid against us, and we put in a really, really way below, $6,000 below what this car was valued at price. It was so low that the poor dealer who was auctioning this car contacted us and begged us to take a different vehicle because he was going to lose so much money on it, which we did not take that other vehicle. And my husband went. It was in Pennsylvania, so he went with his pickup. I believe he went with his pickup, or maybe he rented a truck. But I think he went with his pickup and towed the car home. And so we were able to get a loan, barely, and he towed the car home, and this is what we drove for years. And so for me, I have stuff, is what I'm saying, around leasing cars, car dealerships, buying cars, all that stuff. When I looked at some of the financial trauma from that time of my life, this is something that activates me. And it's been a long time, obviously, right? 2009 was a long time ago. We eventually declared bankruptcy in 2010, which blew up our credit. And we have spent the last 12 years rebuilding our credit, getting credit cards, like even being allowed to have a credit card. I will tell you that JP Morgan Chase, despite my amazing credit history now, will still not give me a credit card. JP Morgan Chase will still not give me a line of credit for my business. So I still have those challenges, but the bankruptcy is off of our records now. And a lot of that healing is done and behind us. And sometimes it still comes up. So this is my history with car things. And I just say that to say it wasn't easy for me to walk into a dealership over the weekend and buy a car. And you might have your thing. It might not be a car, right? We all have something that causes us to be activated around money, sometimes deeply activated or traumatized or, uncomfortable around money. And I want to first acknowledge that. And that's sort of what I wanted to do by sharing that story. So 6 months ago, I started to think, do I want to buy my car? Do I want to buy a car? Do I want to lease another car? I'm sick of these never-ending lease payments where I'm constantly feeding the lease beast. And my big financial goal, my husband and I, our big financial goal right now is to start to wind down what work looks like for us. So we are doubling down, tripling down on some of our investments. We are looking at, what we want our lives to look like once we are in that 50 to 60-year-old category. I'm 46 right now. My husband is 48. And we have worked our entire lives. I've worked since I was 14. My husband has done the same. We were raised in a culture where working harder, we were led to believe that the harder you work, the further ahead you get, the more money you make. And I can assure you that that is not necessarily accurate or true. I think there is some level of effort that needs to go in to making money, whether you work for somebody else or you work for yourself. And then beyond that is kind of like a state of diminishing returns, right? And we have owned a business on or off for the last 17 years. It has not always been easy. My running a service-based business, the way I run one, is way easier than my husband who runs a manufacturing business, especially in this post-COVID world. So that has really shifted our perspectives on, what we want for the long term. And as I was considering what we wanted for the long term, one of the things that we do is we buy quality products. We also buy quality services, but we buy quality over quantity. We don't need a lot of things. This is actually on our Thrive list. At least it's on mine. We don't need a lot of things, but we want high quality things because we take care of our items. And I could be buying something now that I'll have in 15 years from now. And that will serve me as I'm looking to wind down how much I'm working or, what that really looks like for me. So for example, when we first got married, actually this was before we got married. We lived together before we got married. So when we first moved in together, we bought a bedroom set from Ethan Allen. Ethan Allen's got really great furniture. And we bought a chair from Pottery Barn. Also, they have very quality furniture. And we had that bed and that chair for 20 years. for 20 years. So the things that I'm buying now, if I buy them in good quantity, they could be with me well into the time that I'll be retiring and looking to retire, or at least scale back my work or be work optional. And so I do consider that. Like, what am I buying now when I have the funds to buy it that could still be here for me, even in 10 years or 15 years or 20 years, so that I take these things with me and they're not a need or a necessity at a time in my life where I might not be living on as much money as I am today. I don't know if that's a helpful thought. Just, I just want to share some of the ways that I was thinking about this. So those were the factors behind, do I buy the car or do I lease the car? Now, typically, we have always been like, what's the lowest payment? And you might be that person. You might be like, I'm just looking to have the lowest amount of payments, the lowest payment. And sometimes when you go to buy a car, that's not the case. It's not the lowest payment option, right? So we really want to understand, what is it that we're looking to accomplish in our lives right now, but also how does this help us, if at all, for our future financial goals that might be 3 to 10 years out. And so that's through the lens that I was considering my options. I was also considering my options through my Thrive list, right? And I am not a big car person. Like, I drive very minimally. I drive about 4,000 miles a year, believe it or not. I drive around town. Maybe I take a couple of trips, especially over the last few years, but I don't drive this vehicle a ton. I'm not putting a ton of miles on it. So it's not like I have a long commute that I want a specific looking car or a car that does something specifically because I'm sitting in traffic and I want to be comfortable or any of those things, right? So this is not on my Thrive list for an item that I want to or feel I need to go all in on. So I took 6 months to consider my options. And I want to let you know it is okay to take the time to consider your options and to consider the investment or the expense, however you look at it, that you are about to make. And you might have a threshold, like, I don't need to think about things for 6 months if they are at a certain price point. And if they're over a certain price point, then I do need to consider them for a longer term. Now, while I was considering these options, why my Thrive list is important is because a couple of things. First of all, right now, what's the landscape for used cars? Inflation has hit used cars like a mofo, right? Anybody who's been reading the papers know that the cost of used cars have gone up significantly. I did not look up a specific number, but I feel like I've seen that they could be up like 30% in terms of inflation, which is a lot of money if you're buying a used car. I mean, that could be $10,000, depending on the vehicle. And the other thing we know about buying a car right now is interest rates are going up. So if you're going to take a loan on a car or a loan on anything, our interest rates are going up. And that's something that we want to be considering as well. So when I first said I'm going to buy a car, I actually wanted to buy the car I had in 2015, the one lease ago. I loved it. It was small. I did that intentionally, so I didn't have to pack a gazillion kids into my car and be carpool mom. I thought it was a sexy little car. It made me feel sexy when I drove it, and I absolutely loved that car. And I thought that I was going to buy that car again. And I was looking at it, and then upon further conversation with my husband, he said, well, first of all, I think we really need to think through buying out the lease you have. And I did not want to hear that. The car I have now is right. This is like first world problems. It's okay. My car now is okay. It doesn't make me feel the way my other car did. And I realize that I'm saying this with a ton of privilege. So I was like, I don't want to talk about buying out my existing vehicle. But he said, listen, over the last 3 years, you've put 17,000 miles on this vehicle. And here's what I don't think a lot of people realize. And he pointed out to me that when you lease a car, your lease buyout is predicated on the price of the car at that time. So when I leased this car in 2019, We were not hit with the inflation that we're seeing currently on cars, and they have to honor the rate that is in that contract. And I was like, oh, like, because my husband was just buying out the lease on his vehicle at the time, and that's when he realized that. And he was even thinking that he was going to buy the vehicle and turn around and sell it because that's how less money it was that he could buy it off of lease. He wound up buying it for his business, right? So having that 6 months gave me time to consider my options, to have these conversations with people who know more. And instead of being stuck or in my ways or tantruming that I wanted this other car, I really had to get honest with myself and be like, but this, like, a car's not on your Thrive list, Tara. That's not what matters to you about this thing, right? So I was like, okay. So I decided that right then and there, I was going to buy out that lease. So what helped me decide was my Thrive list, that I gave myself time to consider all my options, that I considered my long-term financial goal when making this decision. I consulted not only with my husband, I consulted with my father, who I feel is a trusted advisor, and my accountant. So I do not make big financial decisions without considering other people's input. And I know who I can ask for what things. That's how I look at my network. And I'm like, all right, who do I know in my network who would be helpful in helping me get the information I need, or challenging my perspective, or, helping me make this decision. And so I don't make these decisions in a vacuum. I didn't just go out and buy a car and do as I pleased. I really was thoughtful and mindful about it. Now, knowing that I was going to be most likely financing this car, I did have cash. I could have gotten cash together to buy the vehicle outright. But any time that I can use someone else's money for a period of time at a low interest rate meaning like under 3.5%, I will do that. I will take advantage of that. So anytime anybody gives me like 0% financing on a credit card, I will make sure that, we pay it off in time, because, on those, if you don't pay it off on time, they wham you with all of the interest from the beginning. So just so you know, and we make sure that it gets paid off on time so we could take advantage of the 0% without triggering that interest payment. So I know a lot of folks in my circle and sphere have issues with debt. They have beliefs around debt that came from their parents, that came from society, that came from Dave Ramsey. Wherever they came from, they have this fear around debt. And I like to share that I do take on debt when it makes sense, because I want to destigmatize that. I lived a lot of years paying cash for everything when we went bankrupt. And when I built my credit back up again, I absolutely started to use it, especially in business, to use a line of credit on your business or to take a loan on your business. I think it's a real big myth that you're never going to have to go into debt to grow your business. Now, that doesn't mean, again, like just randomly buying things. You're going to want to consider what it is that you're investing in to go into that might put you in debt for the growth of your business. You want to be smart about it. You want to make wise decisions. But to think that you're never going to take on debt as a business owner is a fallacy and an unrealistic expectation. You don't have to take on debt if you are just, I will not take on debt. You don't have to, but also realize you're potentially making a trade-off around your growth. So I really want to be someone who models that you can take on debt responsibly. And so I knew that I was going to really want to try for a loan for financing. I monitor my credit score anyway, it's something that I have done as we've rebuilt from bankruptcy. But as over the last 6 months, I was monitoring my credit score. I was making sure that, first of all, I always pay my bills on time. That is the number one way to get your credit score up. Make sure you pay your bills on time. The other way to have a good credit score is to have a specific debt to credit ratio so that you're not using so much of your credit, and that also increases your score. So I was making sure that I was paying off. I actually started paying off my credit cards weekly because I wanted to make sure that I was keeping that debt to credit ratio low so that when they went to run my credit, they would see that. The other thing that I do is my credit is frozen. So I go through Equifax, what are the names of them? Equifax, Experian, and there's TransUnion. Those are the 3 credit reporting companies. You are entitled to a free credit report from each of those companies annually. They do also have a free sign up where you can create an account and you can log in and you can check your credit and you can put your credit on freeze. And so a lot of fraud has started happening around credit cards over the last 2 years, more so than ever before. And I have made sure that for the most part, my credit is frozen. That means that people can't access it to run it to open a credit card that is not in my name or anything like that. They can't check my credit unless I unfreeze that account so they can check my credit. And I feel that, that's the other thing that credit scores look at. Like, how many times are you having your credit run? Are you constantly opening new credit cards and applying for credit? So having that frozen and not allowing anybody to access my credit has also helped my credit score go up. But what I noticed was my credit score went up 30 points in the last 30 to 60 days. And I'm not a credit expert. I mean, obviously I went bankrupt and rebuilt. So I want to be really transparent. We had zero credit, nobody would give us a credit card. Capital One was the only company that really helped us rebuild from bankruptcy. And today, 10 years later, my credit score is almost 830. Perfect, right? And it's really important as a business owner that you take your credit score seriously, because if you do need a line of credit, if you do need to take a loan, these things are looked at. And some of my largest clients who have businesses into the millions and millions of dollars, the primary reason, when we look at what is the critical few tasks that they do for their business that nobody else in the business can do, it's being the financial backer. It's being the person who can access credit and capital when needed, because if they couldn't do it, nobody else in that business could. So it is important as a business owner to monitor that score. And I do want to just note that I think I might have found a little hack around paying your credit cards each week. Give it a try. I mean, there's nothing wrong with trying it to increase your credit score. I think that's really what happened. And just for a reference, when I still had the bankruptcy on my credit report, my credit score was in the 600s. When that came off of my credit report, it went into the 700s. And then for the last year and a half that has been off my credit report, I've been diligently working to increase my credit. The other thing that will improve your credit score is, we're talking about that ratio, right, of credit to debt. Go ask, if you're somebody who's very responsible with credit cards and there isn't a lot of activation for you around here and you pay them off or what have you, go ask for an increase to your credit cards, because that gives you more credit that you're likely not going to use, but it improves that ratio. So that's just, some things that I did in the last 6 months to go in to buy the car with the best possible credit score I can have, because that was going to get me the best possible interest rate on the loan. All right, I just wanted to tie it all together. So I went in to buy the car, and car dealers give me anxiety. All right, I spoke about this earlier. Part of it's from my history. But I think also it's like, how many women have gone into a car dealership and have had the car person just talk to their spouse, right? Talk to their husband, or not take them seriously, or mansplain to them, or any of that stuff. And I know that when we implement Profit First in the Bold Profit Academy, going into a bank has a lot of stuff that comes with it for women as well as myself for similar reasons. Like, this is not a place that we have been taught or trained or made to feel comfortable, and they don't come up that much. It's not like you're walking into a car dealership on a monthly basis, on a yearly basis, right? So I was having a lot of nervousness and anxiety, and full disclosure, I want to be very, very honest and clear. I doubted myself until I signed the papers. I second guessed myself for the decision I was making to buy the car until I signed the papers. Okay? Now, when I was applying for, hey, keep you in there. I was there for 4 hours. It's like they do it on purpose. I don't know. I actually don't think they were doing it on purpose in this case, but it felt like they were doing it on purpose, right? So I was there for 4 hours, and I really had to breathe and get present and like not freak out. But I think that it's really important to know that when you're making big decisions, you will doubt yourself. Don't think there's something wrong with you because you're like second guessing your decision. The point is don't back out because you're second guessing yourself, or else you'll never make the decision because you're always going to be second guessing yourself. I don't know how else to say that, right? So bought the car, and because of the prep work that I did, I got a 1.9% financing. And I certified the car. I got a 10-year warranty because I plan on keeping this car for a very long time. And I took out a 3-year loan, which actually doubled my payments from my lease payment, but that's okay because I really want to pay this thing off. I'm hoping that I pay it off sooner, actually. But I don't have to because I have a 1.9% financing. That feels like almost free money today, especially with the way that interest rates are increasing. So everything turned out amazing. I get into the car to drive it, and my energy completely shifts. I feel like a total badass that I survived 4 hours in the car dealership. I actually made them service and wash my car while I was there since I was going to be waiting. And I felt like I had a good experience, and I was reflecting on how that experience is just one more box that I could check off in me feeling more confident and more empowered around my money. So sometimes those feelings of confidence and empowerment are on this other side of doing something that's really uncomfortable and maybe even makes you anxious. So I felt the immediate energy shift. I felt like a badass driving my car. And for the last 2 days, I've done nothing but say, I bought a car and I'm so proud of myself, right? So it all worked out really amazing in the end. And I want to just share some of the things that I think you can take away from this conversation. So the first thing is your Thrive List helps you prioritize and make decisions. The second is give yourself time. If you're making a big decision, it's okay to give yourself time. Plan for it. I don't know anybody. I see this so much as people are like, well, I feel really crappy about my financial situation because I can't have a new car or buy a car or a house or a condo or some kind of investment or luxury travel or like I can't. Well, one does not just wake up one day and buy a car. One doesn't just wake up one day and buy a house. One doesn't just wake up one day and go on this luxury trip. You have to plan for it, right? And how big that is how long you're going to need to plan for it. So, give yourself some time, think things through, make a plan, tap into the people in your network as advisors, even if they're not the person. Maybe they know someone. Who do you know that would be able to help me with making this decision? And I made sure that both my husband and my CFO, my accountant, were on speed dial while I was at the car dealership in case I had a question, because some of those decisions that I was needing to make weren't in my strength zone. Like they were like, do you want the service package for like, I don't know how much it was. It was like $2,700. I don't know anything about servicing cars. I'm not supposed to know that. My husband knows that. He's really good with cars. And maybe it's not your husband who knows it because maybe they're not great with cars, but maybe it's a friend or a parent or a sibling or something, right? So it's okay to have people around you who are helping you make decisions. It takes a team. Know how the decision fits into your goals, right? I knew how this fits into my longer term goal. I'm buying this for my future financial decisions. And the last thing is self-doubt is normal. Expect it and learn how to befriend it, please. Because if you're going to be in a state of self-doubt where you can't make a decision and like you're giving into that, you're never going to get out of that cycle because it's like always with us, right? So we need to be able, the habit isn't, or the goal isn't no self-doubt. It's befriending the self-doubt and saying, hey, I get that you're feeling doubt right now. This is really normal. So, hey, self-doubt, what do you need to feel comfortable with this decision? Or, hey, self-doubt, I feel really confident and comfortable making this decision. It's okay. Thanks for letting me know that I should check in, right? How can you befriend your self-doubt? Anyway, I hope that you all have gotten something out of this episode. I feel like it wasn't necessarily like typical, like it wasn't business related, but I also think it was really important. So if you had takeaways from this episode, I do want you to share them with me over at the Tara Newman on Instagram. Leave me a review. And also, don't forget to sign up for the revenue goal calculator because that's also a big part in helping you understand what you can and can't afford, how much you're going to need to pay yourself if you make big decisions like this, and what your revenue needs to be in your business to support all of it holistically. If you found this podcast valuable, help us develop more bold leaders in the world by sharing this episode with your friends, colleagues, and other bold leaders. Also, if you haven't done so already, please leave a review. I consider reviews like podcast currency, and it's the one thing you can do to help us out here at the Bold Leadership Revolution HQ. We would be so grateful for it. Special thanks goes to Stacey Harris from Uncommonly More, who is the producer and editor of this podcast. Go check them out for all your digital marketing and content creation needs. Be sure to tune into the next episode to help you embrace your ambition and leave the grind behind.